All right. Well, I guess I will go ahead and do the quick introduction. We are joining you tonight for a new episode or a new show here on Shady Sports Network. It's called Summer Showcase Northern Lights. It's the newest addition to our Summer Showcase series, where my compadre here, Michael, hosts a series of ELF, LFA shows, and now we're going to add the CFL to that ring of coverage in other countries. And tonight we're joined by Anthony Parker from Around the CFL podcast. How are you doing tonight, Anthony?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me on here tonight. I'm excited.
Absolutely. It looks like we got a little bit of a lag there. Michael, how are you doing tonight?
Oh man, I'm great. Third show with tonight. Summer Showcase series is off and popping, so I cannot complain at all by any means. I'm excited for this one though. We didn't have any CFL shows, and I was really confused as to why, and figured we might as well go ahead and do one. And who better than Sam, who writes, to be my co-host?
Well, wasn't initially the plan, but things fell into place. We'll just say that. But like I said, tonight we're joined by another podcast host. If you have not heard about it, check out Around the CFL podcast on Spotify. Where else are you at? Are you on Apple and all that as well? Uh-oh.
May have froze. He was having issues a little bit earlier, technical difficulties with his Wi-Fi being a little spotty. So maybe we can hopefully get it fixed here in a minute and get it situated. But either way,
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we'll be patient. We'll try and get him back on here and see if it doesn't work out. We might have to have him exit and come back in, but we will be talking about the Ottawa Red Blacks tonight. So if you're not aware, I actually cover the Ottawa Red Blacks for the CFLNewsHub.com. We're going to start with that breakdown because Anthony happens to be a big fan of the Red Blacks this season anyway. It looks like we got him back here. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
There we go.
Welcome back, Anthony.
All right. Look like we're still.
I don't know what is going on with my Wi-Fi tonight. I'm really sorry, guys.
Looks like we're having a little bit of laggy issues on the Wi-Fi. But that's not anything new for StreamYard. We can definitely get around this. So awesome. Okay, so it kind of looks like we're back. So Anthony, I mean, we'll go ahead and go to you first, and we'll kind of let you get into it a little bit. We'll just go ahead and start with the Red Blacks breakdown to make this nice and easy. The Red Blacks recently released their final roster, releasing these players right here. A bunch of different players at multiple different positions, but notably, you will notice that no quarterbacks were released. And that's the position we're going to start by talking about, is the fact that right now the Red Blacks have 5 quarterbacks on their roster, including 2 quarterbacks that are hurt, Jeremiah Masoli, Tyree Adams. They brought in Drew Brown via trade this offseason to kind of be the starter while Masoli's hurt, probably even while Masoli returns. And then we also have Dustin Crum, who started last season as the QB2, and Jake Dunaway is also there as the QB3. Anthony, when you look at this quarterback position, right off the top of your head, what are your feelings? Do you feel like it's an improved position? Do you feel like Drew Brown can be the guy for Ottawa going forward?
I feel like Drew Brown is obviously going to be quarterback 1. He's going to be QB1. The money obviously states that he wasn't given a huge starting pay, but he still got starting pay. So, he was okay in the preseason, but at the same time, he spent how many years following Zach Collaros? So, I'm wearing a shirt right now. The comeback is always better than the the comeback is always greater than the setback. That is for Jeremiah Masoli. That's why I'm because he had his issue with he who shall not be named a couple years ago. Last year, he goes down again. It is in time for Jeremiah. But not only that, it is redemption time for him on the field and off, right? He's going to come in. He's going to be a leader, but I think he's also going to have that coaching role to mentor the Drew Brown, the Dustin Crum, the Tyree Adams. He is, the elder statesman in the room that's going to be able to bring these guys up to that next level as well. Awful situation last year. So let's be real with that. He did what he could to the best of his two right now, but Drew Brown is the number one guy in Noah.
Absolutely. Definitely seems like we're still having a little bit of lag issues there, but I'll go ahead and go over to my co-host next. I mean, obviously, you said it off screen. We'll go ahead and discuss it on screen. So you said Jeremiah Masoli's hurt again. Not a surprise. Tyree Adams hurt. Not a surprise. And then we got some other guys. Also not a surprise, basically, is to sum it up a little bit. But that is more or less the story for the Red Blacks over the past couple seasons. They've put a lot of stock in Jeremiah Masoli kind of turning around this franchise and being the guy for their turnaround. They've had a lot of losing seasons here in a row. They haven't really won since about 2018, if I remember correctly. And now, they're returning to a veteran, someone that Sean Burke, the GM there in Ottawa, knew well from his time in Hamilton. And it just hasn't panned out so far. But, what are your thoughts with them bringing in Drew Brown from Winnipeg? Where do you think he stands in terms of the quarterbacks in this league? Where would you rank him? Let's put it that way.
It's really hard because we haven't really seen Drew in a full season, so it definitely makes it a little more difficult because we've seen spot starts. He's shown flashes. What it does for Ottawa, though, in my opinion, is you take a look at what happened last year with the Red Blacks, and they went through a quarterback carousel because of injury after injury after injury. Whether it was Masoli or Tyree Adams or even Dustin Crum. I think he got hurt at one point in time briefly or whatever, but they thought they found some magic with Crum, and then it kind of it faltered away towards the end of the year. So they really needed a guy who brought some stability, a guy who brought experience with Drew on a winning franchise like Winnipeg. And I think that that's something that you can't go unstated, right? He comes from experience. He comes from a organization that has won a lot recently and even a championship. So it gives Drew automatic stability to a position that was unstable for Ottawa last year. So I think it's a great move by the Red Blacks to bring him in. I think it's an awesome decision, and obviously he is going to be the QB1 in my opinion. As much as I like Dustin Crum, uh, you can't go back down that road. I don't think because I just don't think he played well enough to just put your trust back into him. Uh, you know, for a full season or whatever, or for however long Masoli's out for, um, in that sense. So I would like to see Jeremiah Masoli back. It's really hard. The guy can't stay healthy, so it's very difficult. And the other thing is how long does Ottawa go before they move on from Masoli, right? That's ultimately at the end of the day. If Drew Brown comes in and plays his lights out, do you really automatically switch back to Masoli when he's healthy? Or do you just ride the hot hand at that point in time? So they'll have some questions, but I think bringing in Drew Brown was definitely 100% the right move because again, it brings in stability, and he has the pedigree coming from a winning organization like Winnipeg.
I would definitely agree. And personally, I don't think there's a situation where we go back to Jeremiah Masoli as the starter unless an injury to Drew Brown occurs or he just plays, absolutely terrible, which I don't foresee. One of the big reasons why I think that Ottawa was so keen on acquiring Drew Brown was the fact that he protects the ball. We've had a lot of different issues with interceptions, with turning the ball over from the quarterback position in particular. Even last season with Dustin Crum, he had, I think, 10 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. So definitely not anything to write home about for sure. So bringing in Drew Brown, you maybe get a little bit more stability, a guy that manages the game a little bit better than Dustin Crum. He probably isn't the athlete that Crum is, but at the same time, I don't necessarily know that we need that from the starting position in order to be successful at this point. But Anthony, real quick, you were kind of garbled a little bit before. What are your thoughts on Drew Brown taking over as the quarterback one for the beginning, for at least the beginning of the season? And do you see a scenario where Masoli takes back over?
Masoli doesn't take the job back at all. I don't think. I don't think there's any world where Jeremiah Masoli is the starting quarterback in Ottawa at all.
I would tend to agree. I mean, I honestly think that Dustin Crum is probably the quarterback two at this point. Definitely the short yardage option, as we saw, in the second preseason game. So interesting to see
I
how
don't even
this
know
is
if he'd
all
be
kind of
2 or
shaking
3.
out. That's fair. That's fair. Do you think they look to trade him when he becomes healthy, if it's not too late in the season?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last part.
Do you think Ottawa would look to trade Jeremiah Masoli if he comes back early enough in the season?
No, I don't think so. There's other quarterbacks around the league right now that other teams could trade. There's Matthew Schultz in Calgary that were the case. I don't see a world where there's any team.
Definitely. Still seems like we're having a little bit of issues there, but we'll get it figured out, hopefully. But moving on to the next subject at hand, the wide receiver position was kind of overhauled basically over the past season and a half, roughly. Bringing back Dominic Rhymes, bringing in Braylon Addison. You draft Nick Mardner at the number 2 overall. You bring back Jalen Acklin. You re-sign Justin Hardy. Among other moves. So, I mean, overall, this position has basically been turned over top to bottom from last season to this season. So I'm curious, when you look at the position as a whole, do you see a drastic improvement in overall talent? And do you see this kind of being the windfall change that we needed in the passing game between Drew Brown and the names we brought in at wide receiver in order to find some success in the passing game this season?
Most definitely. Dom Rhymes, like if you look at even opening day in at McMahon, there's Dom Rhymes is what this team needed when it comes to the receiving core. Braylon Addison re-signed. He got that extension, and he's going to be good as long as again, this is another health issue too with Braylon Addison. Jalen Acklin, he can play. Justin Hardy coming in is great. Devontae Dedmon, I mean, he's fast. We saw that punt return touchdown in the preseason. He's got wheels. He's got the guy that I'm most excited about next to Dom Rhymes is Nick Mardner. The number 2 pick overall. He is. I thought he was going to go very high as well. I actually saw him going number 1. When I did my my pre Edmonton didn't go that way, but I'm actually very glad Ottawa got him. And I think that depending on who the passer is when it comes to the season, that's going to be the big issue, is who's throwing the ball. But the continuity is there with the receivers. And, I talked to Reggie Middleton in Calgary not long ago, and he said it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. it's the receiver's job to get there and catch it. And this is a very big situation where that is very similar, and that's very true. The receiver room in Ottawa is next level, and I would probably put this as one of the top receivers.
Fair enough. I mean, they definitely have a lot of talent. Michael, where would what do you think about this receiver room rebuild that we've kind of brought in all these different names in terms of veterans, and where would you place this receiver room overall in the league?
It's hard looking at the receivers. I was looking at the receivers before I came on. And to be honest with you, I'm not really sure what to expect. It really depends on what Nick Mardner does in his rookie year. Dominique Rhymes, he's been fantastic. I love Rhymes. He's one of my favorite wide receivers in the league. But I don't know if I'd put him in that wide receiver one tier. Like he's not a guy who necessarily strikes me as a guy who can take over a game. And I look at the rest of the roster, and I don't really see anybody that can really do that. There's a lot of high profile, like a lot of high talent guys, but I don't really see a true guy who can take over a game. So Nick Mardner, to me, I watched him in college. I think he's a fantastic talent. I like Anthony was surprised Edmonton didn't take him at one. I know for Ottawa it was very, it was much a rejoice moment to take him. He's 6'6". He's got great size. He's going to be a threat in the red zone, which is something that you love. Rhymes is 6'4", and you have Braylon Acklin, or no, Jalen Acklin, who's 6'2". So I mean, you have three guys that are all fairly big, body type of receivers, which is awesome. And then you have Justin Hardy, who's at 5'10", could play, pretty much anywhere. So um, Drew Brown's going to get creative, and he should be very happy with this wide receiving core. I hope one of them can take a step forward and be a guy who can take over a game. So right now, I'd probably place them in the middle of the pack. There's 9 teams, so probably like right around 6, 5 or 6. But it's so hit or miss because on paper everything looks great, but then you know w- we have to see what happens. It is a new quarterback in Drew Brown, so it's not it's not one of those situations where it, there's a rapport with these guys, right? It's been a carousel at quarterback for some of these receivers. So if they can get some stability, maybe 3 of them, you know, end up in the wide receiver one echelon. You know what I mean? Like the talent is there, the ceiling is there. It's just whether or not they could put it together.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, that's the ultimate question, right? Because we had a lot of talent at wide receiver last year. I know Addison was hurt until the end of the year, but Jalen Acklin was there, Justin Hardy was there. There's multiple different players around them that I thought had some promise that never quite really panned out as well as I thought they could. And obviously, at the end of the day, Crum threw 10 touchdowns, and he was the main starter for most of the season. So that's just not acceptable from a passing game. Um, the big concern this season, heading into this year, is obviously the injury to Javonte Williams. You lose a talent like that at running back, it's not easy to replace, especially when it's very late in training camp at that. So they ultimately lose Javonte Williams. It looks like on paper, at least, Raquel Armstead looks to be the starter. Pretty quick guy, a little bit of a bigger body, but did not perform well in the preseason. So my concern moving forward is this enough? Because if I'm not mistaken, as of right now, the only other back on the roster is Amilcar Polk, who came out of the Ottawa GG's program, was drafted last season, went to training camp with the Red Blacks, and then went back to school, had a career year. So some promise there. Still a lot of concern in the backfield depth. Anthony, how do you feel about this position? I mean, obviously, huge concern with Williams out. How do you think they can perform without Williams there?
I actually thought they were going to be a little bit more aggressive when it came to free agency for running backs. Devontae Williams injury, yeah, that it hurts. I I thought that they would have been more in the market for a Kadeem Carey potentially. I know that they weren't going to land any of the big guns, like, Stanback, he went to BC. There was no way they were getting AJ Ouellette or they were going to get Brady Oliveira out of Winnipeg. That wasn't going to happen. But, a guy like Kadeem Carey could have definitely bolstered up this roster. The fact that they didn't, he won the job, obviously. He's going into, week 2 because they have the bye in week 1. And he's going to be the starter. And, I mean, I'm not sure if Taekwon Mizell is still available because he was cut out of BC not long ago. He isn't, he isn't the best, but he did have some as it was. But I think that the Devontae Williams injury is definitely going to hurt. Drew Brown isn't a fast runner. Dustin Crum kind of was already figured out. A lot of the linebackers are using that spy linebacker now to watch if Dustin Crum is playing. So the run game for me is definitely a concern.
I would definitely agree. And like you said, we don't have the athlete at quarterback now with Crum on the bench to kind of buoy that side of the game. Although he didn't do much for the passing game last season. So Michael, obviously I'm curious about your opinion in this case. I mean, Devontae Williams, huge loss. You were actually one of the people who pointed it out. What do you feel about Reichwald Armstead, Amilcar Polk taking over in the backfield, and do you think that's enough for Ottawa?
I think Reichwell Armstead is an extremely talented running back. I mean, he ran a 4.440. He had some issues in 2020 with COVID that almost killed him twice. Which eventually led for him to be out of the league in the NFL. He was with the DC Defenders of the XFL, did not get picked up with the UFL. The only concern that I have, like you said, is he didn't show out really that well in preseason. He still won the job, which is just a testament to whether either how bad the rest of the running backs were, or as far as the depth was concerned, or it's just one of those things where he was signed to basically just be the guy to take over for Williams when Williams got hurt, or whatever it may be. But it's also very possible that he just doesn't get the CFL style of ball, right? Like, we've seen this before. Like, Ricky Williams was a fantastic running back in the NFL, went up to the CFL and didn't really perform the way he did down here at the NFL because it's a completely different game. It's still American style of football, but it's not the same style of football, right? So I think Armstead will be okay as long as he can find a way to adjust. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Kylan Hill was brought back on the practice squad, correct? He was a
You
fourth
are
round.
correct.
Okay, he's out of Mississippi State. He had a little more of a wide open spread offense in college that kind of fits this this system a little bit more, the CFL system a little bit more. He was a fourth round pick, I believe, to Green Bay with the Packers. Didn't latch on when they had Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. They kind of invested a lot of top capital into them in Green Bay. So there is a talented guy, at least on the practice squad, in Kylan Hill that can come in if needed and be a fill-in spot if they need it. Polk is the wild card because, like you said, he was had a great year in his last year of college or going back to school or whatever, and he's really the wild card in this situation. It is a concern, though. It's probably the biggest question mark surrounding this offense. They stabled, they brought in stability at the quarterback position, but kind of didn't really address the running backs position as much, especially once Williams got hurt. So, big loss with Williams, but I'm hoping Armstead can reach the potential that I think he can. But again, it's just whether or not he adapts to the CFL style of play.
Absolutely would agree. Would you be opposed to, or not opposed? I guess that's a terrible choice of words. If you were the GM for Ottawa, would you go out and sign like a guy like Taquan Mizell, like they said, from BC, who rushed for 773 yards last year?
I
He's
think
out there.
I think that you keep an eye on him. I think you have to go into the season with what you have, see what you got. If it doesn't work out, maybe there's a chance that you mentioned Jeremiah Masoli earlier. Anthony said there's probably not much of a market for him, but there may not be much of a market for Masoli, but you can maybe at least try to make a deal of sort where Masoli is at the center for running back. You know, if your run game is lacking, it's a long season. It's not like this is like, you know, a 10-week season or you know, a 8-week season or something like that. It is a long season, so kind of go in with what you have, see what you got. Don't make any drastic moves or drastic changes, and work with it until it doesn't work, basically. And if it doesn't work right out of the gate, you know, then make the move as quickly as possible. I would stay in contact with Maselli, you know, with Meisel's, you know, camp, just to be safe. But um, you know, running backs are kind of a dime a dozen, to be honest with you. I mean, Meisel brings in, you know, at least experience and some and you know, some decent success at this level. So at least you know what you're getting with him. It's just um, running back is just one of those positions in football that's kind of like you know, it's kind of in between. Like you're either gonna lean on it or you're not, essentially. And with the way your guys' wide receiving core looks and the quarterback situation, I would say you're probably going to end up throwing more than you're going to be passing this year.
Yeah, definitely agree on that front. Anthony, if you were the GM for Ottawa, would you be going out and signing Mazel right away? Anthony, did you catch that?
I think we have a pretty severe lag still. He might have froze again, it looks like.
Oh, maybe.
Oh. Wi-Fi, man. Technology, you know?
All right, we'll see if we can get him back. But basically, yeah, I mean, if I'm Sean Burke, I'm definitely at least having that conversation with Taquan Mizell. I mean, the guy rushed for 700 some yards last season, and he gets released in final cuts. There's some questions about that. Why was he let go? I mean, obviously, it's probably, maybe you get half the reason from him, and you get half the reason from people within the team. But at the same time, why not look into a guy like that, especially if he's got the experience, like you said, in the CFL game? Looks like we've got Anthony back. Anthony, if you were the GM for Ottawa, would you go out and sign Mizell right away?
No, I wouldn't. I would, like you said, I would kind of ride with what you've got at the moment. I would kind of see what happens. And, Armstead has, the pedigree from, other leagues that he's played in before that he can do the job. The only downside to someone like that is, when you see the field as big as it is in Canada, they start trying to run towards the outside and then get caught for a loss of yards instead of trusting the guys up front and just going all out.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that. And Raquel's definitely got a little bit of that in the game. In his game, he can definitely bounce it outside if the situation calls for it. Which is why I was excited to see him play in the CFL. And I hope that, like Michael said, he can make the adjustments to this game and kind of make it work, because I think he could be really good. But we'll see. I mean, obviously, he wasn't an NFL draft pick for no reason. You don't get there by accident. But there was another topic, Anthony, that you brought up, and I'm glad that you did. You wanted to discuss the move to draft Dante Bull last year, first overall. Dante Bull obviously is an offensive tackle, which, as we now know, is most likely going to be relegated to the swing tackle role, where he's going to be the top backup at both tackle positions right now. But he ultimately didn't win the job. So, you wanted to kind of discuss it and kind of hash it out on, was that a bust? And I think this is a great question overall. And I mean, why don't you go ahead and just kick us off? I mean, if you had to guess, in your estimation, is Bull a bust, or is a swing tackle really that valuable at this point in time?
I talked to Sean Burke. I talked to Sean Burke a while back, and he said that he was expecting Dante Bull to come in and be healthy. Problem was Dante Bull showed up at camp this year and was not healthy. He was injured again coming in. I think he came in with a boot, or he came in kind of like Bo Levi Mitchell did in Hamilton. How it was like he didn't come in right away ready to go where he should have been. He didn't come in ready to go last year. They took a chance on him at the number 1, and he didn't play until late in the year. And like you said, he didn't win the starting job this year. So now he's going to be relegated to a backup. I'm not a big fan of, the word bust, but if you were to put a label on a bust, it would be, unfortunately, Dante Bull.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Michael, you're our resident offensive line specialist. So I'll pose the same question to you. How valuable is a swing tackle? And if Dante Bull doesn't eventually take over as a starter, is he a bust?
So here's the thing. So you're talking about a first overall pick, right? You're talking about a guy who came in injured, 2 years in a row. Um, First and foremost, let's answer your first question. Swing tackle is probably one of the most important positions that is never discussed, and primarily it's because if you are a swing tackle, it gives you an opportunity and chance to play both positions, which gives you depth and flexibility on the offensive line. It's a lot of times why you'll see certain players or certain teams draft offensive linemen that have played multiple positions because it gives flexibility on the line to be able to be like, okay, this guy's fantastic at guard, but he has center capability. So if our center goes down and we're a little bit weaker behind him, we can easily plug him in there if need be. The thing with Bull is more, I think bus is a really hard term to throw out immediately. Like you're talking about a situation where this is only the second year. We have an idea of what we're going to get with him. The question becomes, though, is where and how and why is he getting hurt going into the camp? What is happening before camp that is causing this? Is he just being reckless and doing dumb shit and it's just coming back on him? Or is it just one of those things where he just is working his tail off and just getting hurt in the process of getting ready for camp? That's what the question is. Obviously, that's organizational things. They're not going to release that for us. I don't know what it was like when he played coming in last year. I don't really remember because I know Ottawa kind of was like real like on a losing streak towards the end there. Um, but if he doesn't win the starting job by the end of this year, then you would have to say that maybe it was not the wisest decision to take him first overall last year.
Yeah, and part of this, and I probably should have prefaced the question by saying this, but there's a kind of a reason why I don't necessarily want to say this, but the guy that is starting ahead of him at right tackle currently was the second overall pick in the 2022 draft for the Ottawa Red Blacks. So another caveat of this is Zach Pelios good enough at the right tackle position to the point where he's relegating Bull to the bench? Or is this a scenario where this is on Bull, not, taking the job from Pelios, given the fact that he was inserted as a starter last season? And Anthony, I'll kick that question to you first. Did you catch that question, Anthony?
No, I didn't. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good. In your eyes, is this a scenario where Zach Pelios is just so good that he's kind of got a firm hold on that position, or is this on Bull in your eyes?
I think it's a little bit of both. Pelios does have a firm grasp on the position for sure. But, like Michael said, is he doing too much in the offseason? Well, that's what happened with both the Philpott twins just, a year or so ago. They were both working too hard in the offseason. Both of them got hurt, ended up costing Jalen the entire season, whereas Tyson went on to win Most Outstanding Canadian. And, and that's one of the big things that rookies going pro make that's a big mistake that they make all the time is I have to get pro ready. I have to get ready. I have to work hard. I have to put all this extra work in. They end up hurting themselves. So I think, yes, Pelios does have a grasp on the position. But if that is the case for Bull, then it is just a rookie mistake. And, like you said, by the end of the year, we'll be able to tell better on, if he's a bust or not. If he doesn't win any type of a starting role by the end of the year, then it is time to move on.
That's fair enough. And real quick before we move back over to Michael, would you give Bull a chance to say compete at like guard next season, or is it just cut bait, move on, and move on to the next tackle?
I don't know what his experience level is at that, but Coach Dice is the type of guy that will give you every opportunity to be successful. So I'm sure the conversation must have been had. Can he move inside? Can he move outside? Can he play left? Can he play right? There's a lot of things at that guard and tackle position that you could potentially do. And for him to not have the job at all after we don't know about.
That's fair. Michael, I'll go ahead and throw that question to you. I mean, where would you, how would you approach this situation? You're going into the 2025 season. Dante Bull has not unseated Pelios at the right tackle position. Do you give him a chance at right guard, at left guard? Do you try and kick him into center? Do you just move on entirely and move on to the next tackle on the market, or what do you do personally?
Well, so I mean, let's preface this. Let's go back real quick. You talked about Pelios. Pelios was a second overall pick, so it's not like it's not like Pelios is not a high invested draft capital pick. He is. It's just he's a little bit older. They felt like they needed to bring somebody in with Bull last year, so they reached on Bull or whatever you want to call it at this moment in time. They decided on him. He hasn't panned out. Pelios has entrenched himself at the right tackle position. Heading into the 2025 season, I think I would have to look at what the left tackle situation looks like as well. Because if Bull is going to be that swing tackle and add a little flexibility and add you know, the ability to be able to play both sides, I'd have to see be like, okay, if it's not working at right tackle, let's see if it works better at left tackle. The positions are close, but they are also very much different because each one does a different thing when it comes to the quarterback. As for Bull playing inside, he's 6'7", 326. That is a big guard. That is a really, really, really big guard. I would have to, without seeing his athleticism myself personally, it would be very tough to take somebody that size and stick him inside and say, hey, play the guard position. Um, because when you're talking about different schemes and you're talking about different, whether it's pulling or, a down block or whatever else, I mean, that's a big boy to be in the middle like that, to be clogging up, helping out defenses to clog up running lanes of any sort. So, um, I don't know. The other issue is with Bull is I if the injuries coming into camp aren't trying to get into shape for football season, what are you doing? And is your head in the game? That's the other thing. That's another thing that I think is a very much of a big staple that people tend to forget is the mental side of this. Is his head in the game? Is he there? So that would have to be a sit down conversation to talk, and obviously that's a lot of organizational stuff that we're not necessarily privy to unless somebody leaks it or talks to somebody about it. Um, so Bull definitely is going to be an interesting prospect to watch this year as far as like where it's going to go. But I would have to at least give him one more year next year and try to figure out what I can do to keep him on the roster.
That would be my approach as well. And real quick, I'll bring up the depth chart here. So Dino Boyd, the starting left tackle, he's 27 years old. So definitely not old by any stretch, has a lot of football left in him. So it's not like he needs to go. But I definitely agree that you have to kind of see what fits Bull best. You know, sometimes coaching isn't necessarily just go out and acquire the best players and win games. You know, sometimes you need to figure out where a player best fits in your scheme. You know, it may not necessarily be what you initially planned for that player. And it's the great coaches that find a way to make that guy valuable. In my opinion, I know I didn't get it. I didn't really touch on this much. That swing tackle position is incredibly crucial, especially with the way that the Red Blacks structured their roster in 2024. So it's very important to note that they have the 5 starters. They've got 1 player behind their tackles, which is Dante Bull, and they have 1 guard currently. They kept 4 different players on the practice squad, which is obviously a good move. You want to make sure you have plenty of depth there that can come up at any moment, but they don't have a necessarily a designated backup center. They don't have a designated backup left tackle. They're relying on 2 players to basically play the majority of the depth positions on their roster, and that's a bold move when you're going into the season with no depth at center. I don't want to get into details, but let me just tell you guys, I found out the hard way this past season. So with that in mind, I think that Dante Bull, you have to give that guy an opportunity to kind of try and find a way to make him valuable. You don't want to just throw away the first overall pick from a season ago just because he's not necessarily a starter now. Obviously we're talking CFL, so I don't want to necessarily spend too much time talking NFL, but I would liken this to a situation that I got to see very up close and personal in Denver, and that's Garrett Bowles. Garrett Bowles was a high first-round pick. They gave him every opportunity to try and win that job, and for many years, Denver Broncos fans cursed him. They didn't want him playing. They never understood why the coaching staff wanted him in there all the time, and after a while, it got to the point where Garrett Bowles became a Pro Bowl level player because the Broncos showed faith in him and gave him the opportunity to kind of get over some of his issues as a player. And now we're at a position where it would be odd to see Garrett Bowles not be a starter currently in his career. So it's kind of crazy how things flip like that, but sometimes you have to have that faith. I don't necessarily know that Bull is the player that you have that faith with. Like Michael said, if he's continuing to get injured in the offseason, you really need to get to the bottom of why that's happening, how it's happening, and how you can prevent that. If you can get him in to the offseason program healthy, maybe that changes a whole lot for the guy. Maybe it completely changes his outlook on the season. He comes in a new man, and all of a sudden he's a different player. Maybe that's all it takes. Maybe he'll never be a good player, but I think you kind of have to give him one last shot in 2025 to see how he can do, and if he hasn't already claimed a starting job by the end of this year. But we're going to switch over to the defensive side of the ball. But before we do that, I'm going to play a quick word from our sponsor, and then we'll be right back.
This is Current. It's the card my parents used to pay me for mowing the lawn, running errands, and doing well in school.
Oh, wow.
This is the card I used when we got the idea to make our own clothes. And we spread the word, drove downtown, and sold everything we made. This is the card I use to do the things that really matter. This is Current. Visit current.com and download the app for free today.
Current, the official banking sponsor of Shady Sports Network. I use it personally. I'm a big fan of it. Super easy to use. Would highly recommend it to anybody. Anthony, if you're still with us, just go ahead and turn on your camera, and we'll get you right back in here, and we'll start discussing the defense. But in lieu, there he is. Perfect. So let's go ahead and start at the defensive line. We'll talk about a couple different things. Obviously, huge move this offseason to bring back two of the better defensive ends in the game currently, Lorenzo Malden the fourth, and then you also have Bryce Carter opposite of him. You also have some pretty talented interior linemen with Michael Wakefield and Cleon Lang. I apologize. When you look at that defensive line, is it the best in the league currently, in your opinion, Anthony?
Right? Because Lorenzo Malden has won Defensive Player of the Year how many times lately on a losing team? But now, you have Michael Wakefield is coming back, but the other guy too is Dan Okpoko, was a draft pick this year, very highly touted draft pick. Jim Barker on TSN talked very highly of him. Basically, every time during the first round of the draft, the first name out of his mouth was Dan Okpoko, sleeper at the defensive tackle position. Getting older, yes, but he's not getting any slower. He is still that beast out there, and I think if you want to say best defensive line, oof, man, I can't say for sure. Honestly, I want to say yes because I'm all in on the Red Blacks this year, but I don't know. On that one, I have to say time will tell.
That's definitely fair. Obviously, it's hard to rank all these positions before the season. We're attempting to do the impossible, more or less, but at this point, Ottawa returns a lot of their starting line from last season, so you kind of have a good idea what they're going to be. It's just a matter of who's going to lead the team in sacks, I guess, at this point. Michael, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think we possibly have the best defensive line in the league in terms of overall starting talent in Ottawa?
I think that they stay healthy, absolutely. And I also think that your strongest side is going to be when Wakefield and Malden the fourth are lined up on the same side. I don't know how much Ottawa moves their players around or not. I think Winnipeg still might have the best defensive line, or arguably one of the best defensive lines, them or Toronto. But I definitely think Ottawa's up there. In Malden the fourth with Wakefield inside, that is just a combination that is. I don't know, man. I feel really good about that combination. If you're an Ottawa fan, if they're on the same side, you should feel good about it too. That's just the way that I look at it from that standpoint. Uh, the depth is always going to be a question mark with anything with defensive line related. You don't know where the drop off comes from, whether it's from the starting position to the backup or even further, barring injuries. But hopefully they can stay healthy, and hopefully we can see this defensive line do some magic. I will say it will help the secondary out, for sure, having such a veteran and returning D line, because it takes the pressure off of them.
I would agree as well. And in terms of depth, I think we're fairly okay. At defensive tackle, Bless Mentala, one of the higher draft picks last season, played fairly well as a rookie. Then you also have Nigel Romick at defensive end, a longtime veteran with Ottawa. He's been around. He's not necessarily the greatest pass rusher in the world, but still a solid depth piece nonetheless.
Yep.
Aiden John's there as well. Daniel Okpoko that was mentioned by Anthony, also a solid depth. So I mean, overall, I think we're defensive line might be one of the strengths of this team. But one of the other strengths that I really wanted to talk about, and I'm actually very excited to see how it works out overall, is the linebacker position. Obviously, last offseason, we brought in Jovan Santos Knox, who was injured for a lot of the season, but ultimately when he finally got in the lineup was very impactful. You could tell immediately how big of an impact he had. You got Frankie Griffin out there, a weak side linebacker. You've got some solid depth, James Peter, Devontae Taylor, which has obviously piqued a lot of curiosity from players or from fans who aren't necessarily your regular CFL fans, he was a third-round pick in the NFL just a couple seasons ago. So definitely interesting to see him in the CFL already. Briefly talked to one of the scouts or one of the members of the front office in Ottawa, and he said he was very surprised that they even got a response from Devontae when they reached out to him, and that he signed so quickly. But he's very much a guy who realizes where he stands in his career. He's very green. He needs the playing time. So interesting to see him there, but I definitely don't think we've seen the last of him in the NFL. And then out there at strong side linebacker, you've got Adarius Pickett, one of the best in the league, kind of a hybrid player that can play multiple positions, like you mentioned, Anthony. When you look at the linebacker position as a whole, I mean, just give me your overview on it. Are you positive that this is an improved unit in 2024?
150% yes. So last year, I was saying that the best linebacker core in the CFL was Calgary. Right? You had Micah Alway, which is, you love him or hate him, that guy is a monster. Right? Cam Judge, same thing. Titus Wall, he got released this year, but I'm sure they're going to bring, they're going to cover that side. Ottawa now for me, that is the new one. If anything, I would say there might be some question at the weak side or the will side, but middle linebacker, Javon Santos Knox, incredible. Silas Stewart coming over from Calgary, great pickup. Lamenta, who got in the supplemental draft, he is going to be someone to watch out for too. Pick 6, Adarius Pickett. He's ranked the number 6 player in the CFL top 50 for TSN, right? Number 6, and that's a linebacker, which you don't normally see, right? Top 5, top 10 players. If it's not an offensive player, it's a guy that's getting sacked. So it would be like a Malden, for example. But you see a Darius Pickett at number 6 in the entire league coming over here, and Ottawa did a really good show on their YouTube show where they basically they covered free agency, and they showed Sean Burke on the phone right at, I think it was like that noon Eastern time. He was on the phone with Pickett at exactly 12 o'clock saying, hey, we want you here. You're the guy. I'm going to spend all my money on you. And this is 100%. Yes, the defensive line is going to be solid. This linebacker core on the defense, that's what gets me excited.
I firmly agree. Like I said, Javon Santos Knox, I was excited when we got him last season. I thought that was a really big pickup. I really, really thought he was going to improve things for Ottawa. He did. Unfortunately, wasn't right away. But then when we brought in our Darius Pickett this offseason, like in my wildest dreams, I never thought Pickett was going to be wearing black and red this season. I didn't even allow the thought to enter my mind when free agency began until it actually happened. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait, we got Pickett? Like, no way. And I can't tell you how excited I was about that, because immediately it felt like we're swinging for the fences. The past couple of years when I've covered Ottawa, it hasn't felt like that. It's felt like we've kind of tread water. We're trying to bring in names here and there, but typically they're budget signings. And realistically, we don't really spend a whole lot of money on flashy free agents to bring in and really make an instant impact. I thought Santos Knox was kind of a departure from that, and now we get Pickett, which is even a larger departure from that. So, Michael, I pose the same question to you. How do you feel about this linebacker group, considering what they've done over the past 2 seasons?
Well, it gives you, one of the best front sevens or front eights or front sevens in the league. You think about it from a Darius Pickett standpoint. You add him, with Santos Knox, as long as Santos Knox can stay healthy. Because let's face it, Ottawa's biggest problem last year, they were in a lot of games. Their biggest problem last year was really just the injuries. The injuries piled up, and it became too much for them down the stretch. And that was just the story of Ottawa's season last year. The front seven this year takes pressure off that secondary. The way that is. You have Santos Knox, and like you said, Davian Taylor. Coming in, being a third round pick just a few years ago. He is now, with you guys. He's a guy that could provide, he's a good player, and he can provide even more of an impact at that front seven spot that you normally don't get a lot of. It's hard getting three really solid linebackers, let alone four or five. And to me, when I look at your roster, I see some depth, and I see some guys that may be playing behind starters that could maybe start in this league elsewhere. So you definitely have a lot of talent that is going to concentrate that front seven. And honestly, as weird as this is going to sound, your front seven being as strong as it is actually going to help your run game if your run game is not up to par, because your defense will keep you in games to the point where eventually they're going to work it out, right? That's essentially what it's going to happen. And your front seven will help your offense. Like I always say, your best defense is a good offense, but also a great defense is awesome for an offense that might be struggling. So it will help tremendously with this. So I'm glad to see you guys got Pickett from that standpoint. I don't like it because I'm a Calgary fan, so it kind of sucks. But yeah, whatever.
That's okay. That's okay. We will definitely get to Calgary probably next episode, actually. So definitely we'll have to tune in for that as well. But obviously the big point of contention for Ottawa last season was the secondary. We were letting teams slash us up and down the field with their passing game. It didn't seem to matter who we played. We just were getting blown out left, right, and center. There's very few games where we were able to find any sort of success. And Michael touched on it just a moment ago. Injuries played a huge part. Brandon Dandridge was injured at one point. We saw Monshadrick Hunter miss most of the season due to a training camp injury. We saw guys like Tobias Harris coming off the street and end up starting significant snaps in the secondary. Elijah McGee, same thing, came in off the street, ended up being a starter by the end of the season. So it was very interesting to see how the season progressed in terms of where they were finding guys, how they were bringing them in, and how quickly they were getting inserted in the starting lineup. But this season, it seems like that was a position where the Ottawa didn't really do as much as I was expecting, to be completely honest. It seems like they're pretty confident in their ability to stay healthy this season because they brought back a lot of the same guys that were here last season. So, Anthony, I'm curious. I mean, this is a position where I was really concerned about coming into the offseason. Do you think they've done enough in the secondary to kind of avoid what happened last season?
I think they did. And the reason why I think they did is two of their linebackers, Santos Knox and Adarius Pickett. Those guys are both cover guys. They're not, rush the passer, break through, and go for like those linebacker type sacks. Those are cover guys. They're going to spread out. So, when you look at Pickett, for example, he is more of that hybrid linebacker / defensive back style player. So, yeah. So when I say cover guys, I feel like just, with Santos Knox coming back and with Pickett coming in, that really it clears up multiple issues in that secondary. Santos Knox can drop back and help out with the safeties if need be. Pickett can literally fly around anywhere. I mean, one of his nicknames is Pick Six for a reason. And so I think that they're solid in their secondary with defensive back safety, but that boost at linebacker is going to shore up any extra holes that they're going to have.
That's a great point. I really think that makes a lot of sense, and it wasn't something that I had thought about when you're evaluating the secondary. To be completely honest, Michael, real quick, what are your thoughts on the secondary? I mean, do you think they've done enough? Do you think what Anthony says holds water in terms of the fact that the secondary is getting kind of a boost from adding a guy like Pickett and having a guy like Santos Knox at the middle linebacker position?
Anthony said exactly what I was going to say. I mean, like they didn't invest in the secondary because they didn't feel like they needed to. They retained a bunch of people on. They retained a bunch of their players on the defensive line. They added some depth there. They had the linebacker situation. Santos Knox comes back. I was going to say, Darius Pickett is a hybrid player. He's a hybrid DB. He's like that NFL safety nickel spot nowadays with that has linebacker capabilities. Reminds me a lot of Thomas Davis before Thomas Davis made the switch fully to linebacker, by the way. I just want to say that. I think he's a little bit faster side to side than what Davis was, but overall, that's what he reminds me. It's just, I think that Ottawa was just going to be like, okay, how can we help our secondary out without necessarily going out and spending a bunch of money on the secondary spot? And they kind of just focused on the front seven, and that front seven alone is going to be deep enough to the point where I think it's going to alleviate some of the issues that you guys had on the back half. However, if you start seeing injuries in the front seven, I don't know if the secondary is good enough to pick up the slack if the front seven is slacking. So that is a big issue. Primarily, it's just an issue from a standpoint of I think it's much easier to mask a secondary with a front seven than it is to mask a front seven with a secondary. And when the top talents in the position are in other uniforms, it's really hard to put together a solid collective of corners and safeties. So hopefully the injuries are behind Ottawa for you guys in the sense of that front seven to alleviate the back half of that, because otherwise I don't know how well it's going to look otherwise.
If I'm being completely honest, injuries are the one thing that scares me the most about being a Red Blacks fan, to be completely honest. I mean, you look at last season, I think we finished the season with having over 20 players on the 6-game injured list by the end of the year. And it wasn't like we were talking about backups either. We're talking about guys like our starting quarterback and then our backup quarterback. And then, our starting defensive backs on multiple levels, our starting defensive tackle, our right tackle, our backup right tackle. It was all over the place, and it seemed like it was every week we had a new injury that we were missing another player that was very key to the game plan. So, I mean, when I look at this roster, if I have one big concern, it's depth. And it's not at every position necessarily, but if a few key injuries and all of a sudden this could be a totally different roster, and that terrifies me. But at the same time, I feel very confident in the ability of the Ottawa Red Blacks front office at this point to bring in talent on the fly. I've seen a lot of the players that they've brought in from say the UFL and from just free agency and getting the borderline NFL players. And I'm encouraged by that. It seems like we're getting a different caliber of player, even on the back end of the roster. And if that's the case, maybe we can weather the storm a little bit better this season. But ultimately, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting year for sure. Anthony, any final thoughts to kind of wrap this all up as we get out of here for the night?
Yeah, actually, two final thoughts. Number one, week 2 is going to be, that answer to Michael's talking about can one mask the other, right? Because the front seven, well, especially the front four, you're going up against Brady Oliveira, the best running back in the CFL. And then also off that, you're also going up against Zach Collaros, who's going to be throwing to Dalton Schoen, Drew Wolotarski, and Nick Dembski. So, we're going to find out real quick if this front seven, the secondary, this entire Ottawa defense can hold water and stand up. My second point is when you look at the East Division as a whole, right now, I don't see any team that's going to run away from Ottawa, right? So Montreal, of course, they retained most of their roster from all their starters coming out of the Grey Cup. Toronto had the mass exodus, and we also know that their starting quarterback is gone for 9 games. And with Hamilton, Bo Levi Mitchell, I'm sorry, Michael, hasn't been healthy since 2018. Let's be real, right? So we haven't seen a healthy Bo Levi Mitchell in quite some time. And they let Matthew Schultz leave. So now, Taylor Powell was in a very similar situation with Dustin Crum. So, my prediction, I actually have picked Ottawa to win the East this year. So, and the reason why I say that is because I feel like there is a bit of depth there, that if there is an injury in that front seven, an injury, not a lot of injuries, that there's a bit of depth there that can cover. So, yeah, I think week 2 is going to really show what the defense is all about. And I think Ottawa actually takes the East.
Wow. That's a bold claim. So definitely drop your comments. Let us know if you think Ottawa could go from worst to first in the East, because I'm very curious if anybody else shares that opinion. I would love to see it. Ottawa has gone way too long without some winning, and it's really sad to see, because there's been a lot of very talented rosters here and very talented coaches as well. So, I mean, I think it's time. It's been too long, and it's overdue to see some winning here in Ottawa. But I definitely totally worded that incorrectly, because there's one more step we have to do before we get out of here. And that is, of course, a real quick preview of week 1. So week 1, we got some great games coming up. In particular, that Montreal-Winnipeg game, that might be the game of the weekend. We've got Hamilton and Calgary, Saskatchewan and Edmonton, and then also BC at Toronto. 4 great days of football to kick off the CFL season. You have got to love how they spaced out the games this week. It's almost impossible to miss one. So definitely excited for this week of football. But we're going to go ahead and go to Anthony first. When you look at this Montreal-Winnipeg game, do you have a winner that you're feeling right off the gate? Just kind of give us your prediction, and if you have one, a score prediction.
I'm not going to give score because I'm always bad for that. Like when your friend says, "Oh, how old do you think I am?" I'm terrible at those games. So I'm going to say, I think Montreal is going to take this game again. They're going to be able to win this one. So it'll be Montreal, I guess, for all my. And the one thing I have to disagree with you with is game of the week is actually going to be Calgary Hamilton. With Bo's return, that's going to be my game of the weekend. But if you want to look at a tempo game, Edmonton Saskatchewan is actually, that's going to set the pace for both rosters going through the entire season.
Okay, fair enough. Michael, do you have a prediction on this one?
Yeah, I think Winnipeg is going to win this one. Montreal, great run last year, right straight to the Grey Cup and all that. But Winnipeg had some health issues. I mean, everybody doesn't want injuries, and injuries are definitely a big thing. But Brady Oliveira and Zach Collaros, as long as those two are, doing their thing, they retained a lot of their receivers. I feel like Winnipeg does a great job of retaining their top talent every year in comparison to some of the other teams. So I'm going to take Winnipeg in this one, and I'm going to say 26-21.
Okay. I am actually also going to take Winnipeg in this one. Huge Zach Collaros fan, even though I'm a Red Blacks fan. How can you not like that guy? He's a great quarterback. He's fun to watch. But then also Winnipeg also brought back Chris Streveler. So, he's a huge addition. My cohort at CFLNewsHub.com, Andy Paul Murray, shout out to him. He said something that has resonated with me as of late, that it's an art form to be that short yardage quarterback in the CFL, and Chris Streveler is an artist. So when you have a guy like Streveler in that role, you've got a guy like Collaros, you've got a guy like Brady Oliveira, you've got the talent around them on the defensive side as well. I just can't pick against Winnipeg, at least not yet. Maybe things change later in the season, but the way they've played the last 5 seasons, it's hard to pick against them. I'm going to say 27-21 in this game. I think it's still going to, well, no, not 21, because you picked 21. We'll go 18.
You easily could have picked 21. It would have been okay.
Yeah, I know, but you picked 26-21. I end up 27-21. That's pretty sad. But anyway, we'll move on to the next game at hand. Hamilton versus Calgary at Calgary, 7 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Feel sorry for all you Eastern Time guys. These games are really late. But we'll go to Anthony first. Anthony, what do you have for us on this one? Do you have a prediction for Hamilton at Calgary?
Oh man, I don't want to make Michael angry here. So Malik Henry is done for the year, which is that's heartbreaking right there. Stephen Dunbar Jr. returns to Hamilton. Bo Levi Mitchell returns to Calgary. You know what? It's Hamilton for me. It'll be a close game. I'll say 27-26.
Okay. All right. Michael, I have a feeling who you're picking, but we'll go ahead and let you predict anyway.
I am not a fan favorite picker though. Usually,
That's true.
But I am taking Calgary in this game. Jake Mayer is an interesting piece. Like Calgary is going to go as far as his consistency is. He was very inconsistent last year. Showed flashes, and then other games you're looking at him going, "What are you doing?" He was the successor, in Calgary. It has not worked out that well. I think this is his last chance to really prove it. They have some talented quarterbacks that, I think could possibly start for him if he doesn't, show that consistency. So, but I think Calgary just overall, they're young. I think they were the youngest team in the league last year, or second youngest team in the league last year, and their talent is the core pieces are back together. So I don't know about this Hamilton roster. It's the biggest question mark for me out of everybody outside of Bo Levi Mitchell, to be honest with you. The Mazzell cut was kind of a surprise, I think, probably for a lot of people. I don't know if Greg Bell had something to do with that, but it's very shocking to see something like that on a roster that was already somewhat questionable across the board. I could see Ottawa finishing ahead of Hamilton. I don't see Ottawa winning the East, though, but different story for a different day. I take Calgary. I'll take Calgary 24 to 18.
Okay. I'm also going to pick Hamilton in this one, and I have them winning 17-10.
Wow.
Don't just
not sold on Calgary, huh?
I just have a gut feeling. There's something about the way Jake Mayer plays. I have a feeling he's going to come out slow and then heat up. I think it's probably going to be like an 0-2 start for Calgary, and then week 3 we're going to see him come out firing, and all of a sudden he's going to be like a different quarterback for a couple weeks. He's just one of those guys where it seems like you flip a coin and you get a different guy. I'm a big fan of him. I really want him to find success and consistency. I just don't know that it's going to happen right away this season. Could be wrong, though. Could be wrong. Hope I am for your sake, but we'll see. Moving on to Saskatchewan.
You said 17. You said 17-10.
Yeah.
And I said 24-18 Calgary.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
We'll see. It'll be
Okay.
fun.
All right.
So moving on to the Saturday game, we got a 2 p.m. Mountain Time, 4 p.m. Eastern. So we got Saskatchewan at Edmonton. And Anthony, you called this as kind of a pace game. So I'm curious, first of all, why do you call this a pace game? And then also, who do you have winning in this one?
So I call this one a pace game because both teams have a lot to lose coming out of this one, right? So Edmonton last year, we saw, the horrible start, the too little, too late finish, and even the blowing games at the end. Saskatchewan, on the other hand, they've reloaded, right? I don't like the word rebuild. It's a reload, right? Corey Mace comes in and takes over this team. Mark Mueller great offensive mind. He's coming in and he's the offensive coordinator now, right? You got AJ Ouellette coming in, and he is just like that. He is literally he's Thor. He is that smash mouth. He will take the ball up the middle. You know, you got Sean Bain Jr., which I absolutely love that guy as well. And on the Edmonton side, I feel like it was a disrespectful move to bring in McLeod Bethel Thompson, and then it was also an extra disrespectful move to bring in Dakota Prukop when, you know, Trey Ford deserves the chance. So, you know, Geno Lewis, he had some injury last year, but he is still a top tier receiver. But I think that this will set the pace for both franchises going in not only to week 2, but going into the entire season. You know, Edmonton loses and they just have an uphill battle. Saskatchewan loses to Edmonton, who was the worst team in the league last year. Is their reload really working, right? So I think it does work. I have a lot of faith in Saskatchewan and what they're doing. You know, I love some Ryderville now and again. So this game will not be close. I'm gonna say 31-10.
Wow. Okay.
We got a score prediction. All right.
I was gonna say I can't say that I argue with that score. That's all I'm gonna say. But Michael, what's your prediction on this one?
Edmonton just baffles me. I don't know if it's just Chris Jones just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and hoping it sticks, or what it is. You know, McLeod Bethel Thompson, I love him as a player. I'm glad he took a year off to reheal himself. But I mean, we're talking what, is he 38 now? You know, what's it going to be like? You know, especially with coming into a situation with Edmonton, and on Saskatchewan's side, I love this receiving core. This is one of my favorite receiving cores in the league. It's something about Bain, something about Emless. It's just those two guys just resonate with me. I love watching them play. Plus, I love the Saskatchewan new alternative uniforms. Those things are pretty slick. I got Saskatchewan winning this. I don't think it's going to be quite as big as 31-10, but I do expect it to be pretty handedly across the board. 26 to 14 is kind of where I am in that range. I just don't think. I think Edmonton might keep it close at the beginning, but I just think it's never out of Saskatchewan's control.
Firmly agree with both of you guys. I'm going to say 28-7 in this game. I don't have a lot of faith in Edmonton for the same reasons that you guys mentioned. You know, they talk about how if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. Well, what happens if you have 8 quarterbacks? Because then you really don't know what you're doing. And that's basically been in Edmonton all offseason. It seems like every time they cut a quarterback, they brought somebody else in. They didn't really realize that you kind of have to cut down that room at some point. So, I mean, it was asinine all season. And like Anthony said, to bring in all those guys and not give Trey Ford a legitimate chance to win this job it's just insanity, and it's borderline criminal. And realistically, Chris Jones should have been fired last season. But again, we'll talk about that next episode a little bit more in depth. We got one more game to talk about. Another great game. A lot of people are actually picking BC as the favorite to win the Grey Cup this season. Again, another argument that I have a hard time arguing against. BC looks really good this season, especially with the addition of William Stonbach. But then they're playing Toronto. Toronto is probably one of the most interesting teams in the league this season. Obviously, we all know about the Chad Kelly situation. He won't be there for the first 9 games of the season, we believe. You know, possibly that gets shortened down. It doesn't look like it at the moment. And it looks like we just lost Anthony. So with that in mind, Michael, we'll go to you first. Who do you have in this game, BC or at Toronto?
Well, Toronto obviously had their issues in the offseason. It sounds like Chad Kelly has his lawsuit settled, which is good news for Toronto. They can put this behind them. But kudos to Cameron Dukes for getting the start and getting what appears to be the QB1 job. And that's great news for him. I love him. Cameron Dukes, I think, is a fantastic player. A lot of people are picking BC because of their offense. I still have questions surrounding this defense. I don't know if this team is as complete as Toronto is. I know that we really don't want to have Toronto be near the top yet again and get to that point, but it's hard to pick against the team that has been to the last 2 Grey Cups, and it doesn't really seem like they lost a ton of people. I mean, they did lose AJ Ouellette, but they're just going to reload with anybody at that run game as they always do. I'm taking Toronto in this game. I think this game is going to be a shootout of sorts, though. I'm going to say 31-30. It's going to be a very close game, and I would not be surprised to see BC beat Toronto, but I'm taking Toronto 31-30.
All right. I'm actually going to go the other way with that. One of the big losses that you are probably just thinking over because it's not a typical loss for a team is Qantas Stiggers. So,
well, yeah, I mean, Stiggers is obviously a huge loss, but I don't believe that him himself is the one piece on that defense that's going to cause this defense to suddenly crumble. That's all.
That's fair. That's completely fair. But then there's also our Darius Pickett, and like those 2 players, those are pretty impactful guys to lose. But I'm in other, for lack of a better sum up there, I'm going the opposite direction. I'm going to pick BC. I assume it's going to be a close game. I still have a lot of faith in Toronto. I think they're a very talented team. I fully anticipate a situation where we see them continue to be a playoff contender. And I personally think that they're going to keep this game very close. I think BC is probably going to win it on a last-second touchdown and ultimately take it 35-31. I've got a lot of faith in Vernon Adams there, William Stanback. That roster is very talented, and they are a favorite to win the Grey Cup for a reason. Anthony, I'm glad we got you back just in time to make the final prediction in this week. Who do you have between BC and Toronto?
100% BC, 110% BC. This Toronto team is on shaky legs already without all the turmoil that's going on off the field. And BC's, they've got some issues at receiver. They've lost some guys. There's some injuries, but Stanback coming in the run game. Vernon Adams is Vernon Adams. This game will be kind of an easier win for BC. Kind of more of a blowout type win, I think, even worse than the Saskatchewan-Edmonton game. And also, to mirror what you said, BC will win the West. I think it's going to be BC-Ottawa in the Grey Cup, and then that's going to be a shootout. That's going to be a fun one. I guess we're looking at Labor Day, right? The Touchdown Pacific. That's going to be a Grey Cup preview.
Wow. Do you have a score by chance? You don't have to.
28-7.
Oh, wow. Okay. So in this game, it looks like if you're betting on our picks, then you want to go with BC. Me and Anthony both picked BC. If you're looking at last game, we've got all 3 of us picked Saskatchewan. And then we've got Hamilton was picked by me and Anthony. Michael picked Calgary. And then in the first game, we had Michael and I picked Winnipeg. Anthony picked Montreal. So just a quick sum up of all the picks for this week. If you're a sports bettor, make sure you check out all the different betting platforms that the CFL is now offered on. Plenty of room to make some money there if you know what you're talking about and doing. That's definitely not for me, but more power to anybody who wants to pursue that themselves. Anthony, you mentioned off camera that you just did an episode with Dave Naylor. I assume that's going to be your next one coming out on Around the CFL. Where can everybody catch that, and when can we expect that to come out?
It came out today, actually. So it's on all major platforms: Apple, Amazon, Spotify, iHeart, you name it. It's on it. Dave Naylor and we talked about the Chad Kelly situation in depth. We talked about the Sean Lemon gambling issue. Funny, since you just said about gambling. And then we kind of went into a team by team rundown of what we're looking at. So, and then we did our 2 early predictions, and that's exactly the prediction I gave on my show is BC Ottawa.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So definitely go check out that episode right away. I will personally vouch for Around the CFL podcast. I listen to it in my free time because it is that good. He has great guests on there. It's people you want to hear from. He asks great questions, gets some great insight. And I firmly recommend going to listen to his Sean Burke episode. I recommend listening to his Reggie Beggleton episode that I just listened to yesterday. Plenty of great guests that he's had in the past. I mean, you could realistically binge watch or binge listen to his podcast for months and never miss out on great content to listen to. So firmly recommend it.
And you know what? I'll give your watchers a special update here next week, which I haven't announced yet, which has already been recorded, is Matt Baker. He is the senior manager of communication with the BC Lions. So we kind of pull the curtain back on what it takes to put a preseason together, what it takes to put Touchdown Pacific together, what it takes to put Grey Cup together. We talk about all that stuff, and we talk about some Lions football as well. But yeah, so that's next week. So that's no one knows that yet, but everyone who's watching this right now.
Anthony, do you mind if I mention your other side profession that you've recently gotten into?
Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so for players out there that may be watching right now, Anthony is also a certified agent. So he just recently started working with Pro Level Sports. The showcase that I recently went to in April was run by Pro Level Sports, so I highly recommend them as an agency. And now you can also get represented by Anthony, who obviously has connections in the CFL. Not guaranteeing anything, just saying. It's probably a decent person to be represented by if you're looking to make that jump into the CFL. So definitely wanted to shout that out as well while we have the opportunity. Plenty of players that watch this channel, so you never know. Maybe that helps you out a little bit.
Definitely.
Hopefully. So Anthony, really appreciate your time, man. Thank you for coming on. Again, would love to have you back on in the future, and hopefully we can get you back on before the end of the season.
Definitely. I'm sorry for the technical issues I was having tonight. I don't know what the issue was, but we got it kind of sorted out at the end, unfortunately, but I do apologize to everyone for the beginning.
It's all good, man. Stuff happens. Part of the difficulties of going live for sure. But thank you for your time. Definitely appreciate it. And we'll definitely catch you in a future episode.
You bet. I'll look forward to it.
Absolutely. So, Michael, any final thoughts to wrap us up for this evening?
Nah, man, just third summer showcase, series. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the Shady Sports Network, hit the little dingy so you get the little notifications going on as well up there in the that little YouTube corner here for the Shady Sports Network. And Sam, again, I thank you every episode because I can. Just thank you for the platform for giving us a chance to talk. And I'm so happy that we have a CFL show now. And I think this is going to be a fun show for sure.
I agree. And I think we've got some pretty sweet guests coming up down the pipe, and definitely just stay tuned. There are already 3 other CFL roster breakdowns recorded that will be coming out soon. I'm behind a little bit on editing. That's why we don't have an intro yet. So that's completely the only reason they haven't been released yet. So I will get caught back up over the next couple of days. I'm thinking probably release one on Monday. And then we'll go from there. I think I've got Calgary, Toronto, and Hamilton done already. And then obviously this was our one for Ottawa. So if you cover the CFL and you would like to come on here and break down a team that I did not just list, feel free to shoot me a DM. I've got somebody lined up from Montreal. I plan on having him on. And then after that, basically every other team is still fair game currently. So if you would like to come on and chat some CFL with us, let us know. And we'll definitely get you on here. But with that, Michael, man, you thank me, but realistically, I feel like I'm the one that should be thanking you guys. it's crazy to think and look back on, but like 3 years ago, this started as just me talking about NFL, and now it's grown into something that I never could have imagined it's been. And it's because of a lot of the people that I was very lucky to meet, including you, Chris included. I'm not going to sit here and name every single person, but just know that everybody who is on this channel is very much appreciated. You guys all do great work, and without you, I couldn't do what I do. And honestly, it's been a lot of fun getting to know all of you guys. So, I would vouch for every single one of you guys. So if you happen to be a bigger network somewhere else that can pay one of these guys, I highly recommend that you check out every single one of them, because they're all very much worth their while. I'm working on it, but we're not quite there yet. And if you would like to help us get there, make sure you check out some of our sponsors. It doesn't cost you anything necessarily to use our sponsors without getting a service in return. So, you can support us for free. We're not one of these brands that's going to sit here and beg you for money all the time. If you want to support us, find a service you like that we happen to represent, and then, support us that way. That's all we ask. Also, make sure you click that subscribe button, hit the like button. You have no idea how important that is for us. And then also make sure that you're tuning in every chance you get, because we got a lot of great content coming out and every view counts. So with that, we would also appreciate some shares, but we'll catch you in the next episode next Wednesday at 10:30 p.m. Eastern.